Lieutenancy. I'd like to thank the organisers of this meeting for inviting us to speak. As the other speakers so far have mentioned, we are gathered here to discuss a critical issue for the international working class in this period that is characterised by the loss of global hegemony for American imperialism, and, on the other hand, the role of other powers, including Russia, in shaping an increasingly multipolar geopolitical world order. We'd also agree that the origins of the current military conflict between Russia and the Ukrainian proxy of US-led Western imperialism can be traced to the 1991 capitalist counter-revolution, as we have outlined in our published materials. The US has sought to expand NATO throughout Russia's near abroad by enlisting the countries of the former Warsaw Pact. It's important to recognise the long-term strategic objective of the US, as described by Dick Cheney when he was Defence Secretary under George W. Bush, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's National Security Advisor, and that is to dismember Russia and create 3, 4, or 5 smaller, more pliable, that is, exploitable states. For the past several decades, the economic weight of the US and its imperialist partners in NATO, as well as Japan and Australia, in the global economy has been declining, while China, where collectivised property relations remain dominant, has been steadily gaining ground on its advanced capitalist peers. The global economy is at the edge of a major economic crisis that will dwarf the 2008 crisis. And even before the impact of the COVID pandemic, global capitalism was clearly showing signs that a major profitability crisis was in the offing. Now, as the sanctions against Russia spectacularly backfire, most notably in Europe, where exploding energy price rises are driving the most serious cost of living escalation in generations, international capitalism stands on the brink of the most dire economic crisis since the Great Depression. Russia's economic engagement with the world, particularly the former Soviet republics, is primarily categorized by selling commodities, particularly oil and gas, and selling that at prices lower than those on the current world market. Rather than extracting super profits in its near abroad or anywhere else for that matter, Russia derives most of its income from energy sales, largely to Europe. It must be recognized that Russia is not a predatory imperialist power, despite its formidable military, but rather essentially a dependent capitalist country. As the other speakers have mentioned so far, and I'm sure the other speakers tonight will also mention, a military victory for Russia over Zelensky's US-backed Ukraine will strike a powerful blow against global imperialism, just as the Russian defeat will embolden the US and its NATO stooges for further aggression in the Indo-Pacific, particularly against the Chinese deformed workers' state. That is why revolutionaries side with Russia in the current military conflict, while refusing to offer any political support to Putin's Bonapartist anti-working class regime. We took the same attitude toward the struggle of the Taliban to drive the US and its NATO allies out of Afghanistan, for instance. This issue of offering military support to Russia in its struggle against the Ukrainian proxies of US NATO imperialism is an acid test for all those who claim to stand in the tradition of Lenin and Trotsky. Unfortunately, it is a test which most of those who claim the Bolshevik tradition have failed, with some taking a position in neutrality, while others siding with NATO's Ukrainian puppets. Alongside this, whilst the imperialist governments are throwing billions of dollars to prop up the Zelensky regime with the aim of weakening and ultimately destroying Russia, workers in the West are becoming increasingly restive as it becomes clear to them that this reckless military adventure, which is going to destroy much of Ukraine and cost many tens of thousands of lives, is going to be financed by slashing popular living standards in the NATO countries. I live in Ireland, and we can see that primarily over the issue of energy price increases. So intercepting that sentiment and making the link between the imperialist war drive and the cost of living crisis must be a central focus for Marxists in the coming period. This is because it is vital to communicate to the millions of working people turning against NATO's war in Ukraine that a Russian victory is in their direct material interests. On May Day, the Bolshevik tendency marched in London and Toronto under the slogan, US-NATO war drive against Russia and China hurts workers everywhere. The other groups speaking here today, who broadly share our perspective as I understand it, have put forward a variety of slogans, including, and these are some I found on your websites, victory to the Donetsk and enhance people's republics and their allies. US-NATO, hands off Russia, get out of Ukraine and Eastern Europe. For defeating imperialism and defending Russia and Donbass. It is necessary to support Russia in its battle with imperialism. We stand with Russia in this conflict. However, we note that the Worldwide Organizing Network Against Fascism, Imperialism, Racism and Exploitation, or World on Fire for short, which most of the groups represented here today are affiliated with, avoids a clear statement of which side to support in its call out for action. Instead of making it clear that genuine anti-imperialists must side with Russia and its allies against NATO's client in Kiev, the propaganda put out by your bloc has a pacifist stop the war message. This is shown by the slogan proposed as the basis for common action that deals with the immediate conflict. You say, stop the war of US-NATO imperialism against Russia. This is presumably due to the opportunist calculation that this will make it easier to get a hearing, and it probably will. But this comes at the political cost of blurring the key issue and end up echoing the slogans of the various larger formations of centrists, opportunists and left reformists whose opposition to NATO has an essentially pacifist quality. So we call on those of you who are seriously committed to the Bolshevik Leninist tradition to heed Trotsky's injunction, made nearly 100 years ago, but which retains all its relevance for Marxists today. I'm sure you'll all recognize this. To face reality squarely, not to seek the line of least resistance, to call things by their right names, to speak the truth to the masses, no matter how bitter it may be. If we are to build a bloc which is clear on the distinction between the fake anti-imperialism of most of the left, it is necessary for that bloc to have, as part of its basis, support for the victory of Russia. Thank you.